Good morning, everyone. I'm Louise from So Sophia, and welcome to my mini wallet challenge. This week, I have set myself the challenge of making a batch of mini wallets for my Christmas craft fairs that are coming up in November. And I thought, well, since I'm making a whole batch, I might as well share how I make them, and you can have a go too. So we are making the Kalina Mini Wallet pattern. It's by AppleGreen Cottage by my good friend Damiana, and it featured this wallet featured, here's one here, in my October box for the Busy Bag Maker. If you subscribe to my October bag project this month, you will have received this as a bonus pattern to make alongside our bigger bag, because it will go inside the bag. It's the perfect size, and so anyone who subscribed would have got the pattern plus the hardware to make this wallet. It's a super little pattern to make, beginner friendly, domestic machine friendly. Damiana has thought of everything in her pattern to make sure that your sewing machine will be able to sew this no matter what machine you have. Really, she makes sure that all the seam allowances are free of interfacing, so that you can sew it easily. It's a quick and easy pattern. I like making it for my craft fairs because I make it in batches. So I'll make all the zip pockets together, and I'll make all the card slots together, all the flaps together. And I generally try and use the same color thread, same color lining, so that I'm not changing all the time, changing things all the time. But we're going to just make the one wallet together online, and then the rest of this week I'm going to make the rest of the colors that I want to make. But I'll show you what it looks like. So it closes with a metal snap. I'm going to show you how I install the metal snap. You can install a plastic cam snap, and I'm also going to show another way of doing it with a magnetic snap. I've got a little magnetic snap there. It's 14 millimeters, so it's a small one because it's a dinky little wallet. So that's what I'm going to be showing you. It has an optional keyring. You can add a keyring. Hi, Sophia. And you can add a keyring, or you can add a little D-ring, or even a little lobster clasp, because you can clip it onto the inside of a bag if you want to hold it in securely. You can clip it on a belt loop. You can put it in a child's backpack for school if they've got their lunch money or a library card or whatever. So really useful to have. I always include a keyring just because I think it's such a useful little extra to have on a mini wallet, and it's pocket sized, so you can even pop it in your pocket or coat pocket. So it's got a little zipped pocket for any change, and you can put a contrast lining in there. It's really sweet. And then behind the slip pocket, behind the zip pocket, is a slip pocket. You see with my hands in there. You can fold up some banknotes in there. And then on the other side, 3 card pockets, right? But I usually double up. I usually have about 6 cards in my wallet, because I've got one too. I've been using it for like 4 years. So 3 card slots which you can double up on with cards. And then it closes up neatly and snaps shut. So that's what we're going to be making. Now I've got a few fabric choices. If you're making one, let me know. And let me know if you've chosen your fabrics yet. Because when you're making your first one, it's useful to use a busy fabric, a non-directional, so it doesn't matter which way you cut it, upside down. I mean, it looks the same upside down or right side up, if you know what I mean. You're not worrying too much about the position when you're cutting out your fabric, and you're not wasting fabric. Whereas this one, the leopard version, that's directional. So you'd need to know how to, say, cut out that flap with the cat on it without cutting the flap upside down, if you know what I mean. So you need to think of these things when you're choosing your fabric. Are you going directional or non-directional? More often than not, I choose a directional print, and then I get stuck because I have cut one of these before with the house upside down. So I never seem to learn from that, but yeah, that's a directional one. And then here's another sweet floral one. This is a bit festive looking, really. This is Rifle Paper Co. It's a bramble print. So just think before you choose your fabric. Here's a very directional one, featuring Amsterdam and Cairo. See, I've actually, for this one, I've made the flap larger to accommodate more of the print. So if you see it closes up there with the, I wanted to feature the camel on that because of the word Cairo. I'll just show you what that looks like. And you can get to play with, it's such well, it's a small project, so you can rummage through your scraps, your fabric scraps, and use really small pieces. I even save my scraps to make these little keyring tabs, or the back of the flap, because it's a really great way to use it. It's a real good scrap buster. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I'm going to be cutting a few for my upcoming fairs, but I'm going to cut one now. And it's in the fabric that features in my October box because I need to make the matching wallet for the bag that I've made. All right. So I've cut out all the pattern pieces from the pattern, and you can actually make the pattern without printing out the pieces, so because they can be measured and cut out instead if you don't have access to a printer, which is great. Now what I've done, well, you'll need to create a longer piece for the credit card slots, so you do need to stick those together, but you can measure and cut this. I won't be giving any of the measurements in this video because it's not my pattern, and you'll need to buy the pattern in order to get the precise measurements. But one thing I'll show you now, for example, for the credit card slots, you need to cut out one piece in your fabric, your lining fabric, but then you need to cut out a second piece in interfacing. And when you cut out the interfacing, this is just a tip, you need to cut away the seam allowance because you don't want the interfacing to be the same size as the credit card slots. So what I've done is I've cut out a second pattern piece. I've printed out a second pattern piece, but minus that seam allowance. So I've cut along the dotted line, and this is the piece I use to cut out my interfacing. I just find it much easier when I'm cutting anything out in bulk, that I've got the exact measurement for the interfacing and the exact measurement for the card slots. I've cut out my piece for my credit card slots. Okay. And now I need to choose my outer fabric and cut that out. I've got my zip pocket lining and then my zip pocket piece. I've got my little keyring tab and my flap. Now I'm using these for the card pockets, and then I'm going to make my wallet out of this lovely mustard floral fabric. This is one of the fabrics that features in my October box, and in fact, after you've made the bag in my box, there's enough fabric left over to create a matching wallet. That's why I decided to include the pattern. So you just need to decide, taking your outer shell pattern piece, you need to decide what you'd like to feature. So there's a sweet little bird there. And if you're not sure how it's going to look, you can fold your pattern in half and place it somewhere where you'd like, you want that bird to feature on either the front or back. So you need to make sure that you cut in the right area there. So I'll just position my pattern piece there. You can use a rotary cutter, you can measure and cut. I don't bother to pin my pattern pieces to my fabric. I think because I've been doing it for so long, I just hold it down firmly and just cut around. And in fact, my rotary cutter blade is a bit blunt after cutting out a lot of fabric last week. So it's better to play it safe and use some sharp scissors instead. So there's my outer wallet fabric. So if you fold that in half, you'll see there's a bird on the one side and a bird on the other. Perfect. I'm happy with that. Now I need to decide, and I cut one out earlier, do I want a contrasting flap, or do I want the flap in the yellow fabric as well? And I'm thinking I might just make 2 wallets and have one with the contrast and one in the yellow. And you could even make a longer flap, cut out a longer flap, a wider flap to feature a peacock on it as well. But I think for the moment I like the contrast. And what I'll do is, you see, it's a great way of using up just the smallest of pieces of fabric. So I'm going to cut out another wallet piece, another flap piece, sorry, in the wildflower. I'm just going to trim that a bit, because that will be the lining side. I'm just making the flap double-sided, the same fabric. And because it's floral, I'm not needing to think about fussy cutting. And when I say fussy cut, remember the cat there. Now this isn't the perfect fussy cutting, because I ended up having to put a snap almost on his head. So you've got to think of things like that. If you want to feature something on the flap, where are you going to put the snap? And is it going to cover the animal's head? So there's I've got my lining piece and I've got my 2 flap pieces there, lining and front. I've got my outer shell, I've got my credit card pockets. Now, I really like the idea, and I'll show you an example again. For the zipped pocket, I actually like featuring the same fabric from the outside inside. So I'm going to do that with this fabric as well, since I've got plenty. So you take your zip pocket piece, and I'm going to actually include this peacock. So the one thing I should point out, with the zipped pocket piece, it's almost the same size as the outer fabric. So I suggest marking on the back of your piece pocket, because I've been caught out more than once cutting this out and using the pocket piece for the outside of my wallet instead of the outside of the, if you know what I mean. I've mixed them up. But I'm just thinking now, so the zip will go there. Yeah, I'm doing it right. That's the only thing with you have to think, well, what direction am I going to be folding the zipped pocket? I want to be able to see the design. And this this wallet pattern is perfect for quilting weight cotton. I have made it in canvas before, and I have made it in laminated cotton before, but this is canvas, it's thicker than quilting cotton, but you do need to reduce how much interfacing you use if you're using a thicker fabric, because it can be really difficult to get around those corner seams, especially when you're sewing around the zip edges. So that's just one thing to be wary of. If you're using a thicker fabric, it doesn't always work out right. This one's all right, actually. Okay, so now, where's my, I'm going to put here, well, I know that the peacock is for the pocket, so I'll just put a P there for the pocket. Okay, I don't need any more of my yellow fabric. And I've still got some of this wildflower fabric, so I'm going to use it for the lining for my zip pocket. Just a square, almost. I'll cut around. And then I think, is that it? I've got, oh no, I've got to do the key ring as well. So I've got my lining for my zip pocket, and then this tiny little piece is for my key ring. So again, just using up all your scraps. It's the perfect project to use up all that fabric that's just sitting in a cupboard. And then we can move on to the interfacing. Right. So there's my little keyring tab. Moving on to the interfacing. Okay, so I use a high quality woven cotton interfacing. So it's got a fusible side, it's got a glue side which is a bit rough, and then a softer side. So I've got a nice big piece here to work with. And then, as I said before, I've cut away the seam allowance. I've printed out the pattern twice so that I could cut out the seam allowance. It just makes it easier. You can measure and cut as well, but I just find it so much easier this way when I'm doing a lot of cutting. So you need interfacing for the credit card pockets. And it looks like a lot of fabric, but you need to iron it in a certain way to create the pockets. It's a very clever pattern. Okay, there's a little bit there that's just straggling. Okay, so that's for my credit card slots, and I'm going to fuse that in a minute. And then you don't actually need that much interfacing for this. So that's for the zip pocket. So again, if you have scraps of interfacing, it's great for using those up as well. Every time I want to throw away a small piece of interfacing, I think, no, I could use it for a Kalina Mini Wallet. So this is for my zip pocket, so I'm going to just put it together with that. I'm just cutting out the interfacing now. I've cut out the fabrics that I'm working with. And I find it easier to just, well, for this flat piece, I'm cutting one piece of interfacing the full size of the flap, and then I'm cutting out another piece minus the seam allowance. Let me just see where that is. So I've got my flap pattern piece, but then I've cut around the dotted lines for the interfacing piece. So I'm cutting that out now. And I'll need to add another layer because of the magnetic snap that I'll be installing. It's a bit fiddly cutting out the tinier pieces. I probably should be using smaller scissors at this point. The ideal fabrics for this kind of project, I would say, are Lewis and Irene. It's a British fabric manufacturer, and they have the cutest prints. Let me just show you one. You might have seen my wallet that I advertised this challenge for. It's this wild swim wallet with that lady in the lake, and look at her little feet peeking through. And I'll be making wallets out of this as well. But they always have tiny, tiny features on Lewis and Irene Fabrics. And I'll pop a couple of links after I finish this video for Lewis and Irene Fabrics. I think the Fabric Squirrel stock those, and Wool Warehouse stock them as well. And yeah, they've got tiny prints with little dogs, little cats, really fun fabrics that are perfect for the Kalina Mini Wallet. So I've got two. I need to actually cut out, yeah, I need to cut out the fleece for the flap as well, so I'll do that afterwards. And I think, have I done that one? Right, for the main wallet, I'm cutting out a full-size piece of interfacing. I'm not cutting away the seam allowance, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Wow. The pattern calls for a piece of fusible fleece, which you center behind the exterior of your wallet and your flap. Now, I hardly ever buy fusible fleece. I find it expensive, for one thing, but I tend to use a sew-in fleece instead. This is Thermolam Plus. It's called Thermolam Plus. I've got another scrap. I find it thicker, a nice thick quality sew-in fleece, and I actually prefer using this to fusible fleece. So what I do, I'll show you now. I've got my pattern piece for my outer wallet, but I've cut away the dotted line so that I can cut out the fleece layer. So I'll go ahead and cut it out, the exact size that you'd need for fusible fleece. I just don't seem to get on with fusible fleece. I don't like the way it irons on. It depends on the brand that you get. I think if you're going to go with fusible fleece, to me the best brand is Peltex 71F. I can pop a note in the comments about that as well. That to me is the equivalent of this sew-in fleece, but with a fusible backing, and that is the best quality. I'm not so keen on the Fleeceline. Is it 640? I don't like that so much. But anyway, what I'm showing you now, this is my top tip if you don't have fusible fleece, but you've got a sew-in fleece or some wadding instead. What I do is I've got my outer fabric, and I center the fleece on top, and then what I do is I put a full-size piece of interfacing on top of that, and I'll fuse that in place instead of using a fusible fleece, and it works a treat. All my wallets are made this way. I've not used fusible fleece in years, and I think it works great. Works in the same way. But one thing I'll be doing first, before I do that, I'm going to add where the snap is going on my wallet, I'll be adding a square of interfacing there just to reinforce the area before I go ahead and put the fleece down. So where's my interfacing? And all I'm going to do next is fuse the interfacings on, and I was going to, if there's still time, I'm planning to fold the credit card pockets, because that's Damiana's instructions are perfect, but it can be tricky folding credit card pockets. And I have my iron on I'll put it on 2 dots, so a medium setting, not the highest setting. And in fact, before you even start cutting out your fabric, you really should give it a bit of a press to remove any creases, which is what I'll do here. This is the outer fabric there, and then I had a piece of interfacing to go on that. Okay, so I wanted to position a strip of interfacing just where the snap's going to go. In fact, I should be using a pressing cloth for this. Do as I say and not as I do. Now I'm going to position the fleece centered behind the pocket piece. I could do with trimming it down a fraction more, I think. Just knowing how my machine is, because I don't have an industrial machine. Just going to trim it a fraction more, so it's about 1 centimetre less all the way around than the actual main fabric. And then I'm going to position my interfacing fusible sides down over the fleece, making sure everything's centered and lined up. And then I just press it in place. So there, instead of using fusible fleece, I've just used ordinary fleece in the center and then ironed some interfacing on top of that. And I can see it's just peeking out the side of the interfacing, so I'll just trim that and trim it there. But it works a treat. I'll just give that outside a blast. And then that piece is ready to add the snap later. We're doing that another day. And then the zip pocket lining doesn't have any interfacing, which is great, so just give it a press. And then this is my zipped pocket fabric, so I'll give that a quick iron. And then again, you center your ordinary interfacing, you center it on your zip pocket piece and give it a press. And then I've got my little flaps. I was getting in a flap with my flaps. So first I'll center the smaller bit of interfacing, and then I'll cover it with a bigger piece. Actually, this piece will be better. Give it a press, a light press, and then I've got my little fleece layer. And I position that in the center of the other side of the flap. And because I'm using the same fabric on both sides, it actually doesn't matter which side gets the fleece and which side gets the interfacing. Okay, that's my little flap ready to sew together. And then I've got the teeniest, tiniest keyring tab. And for this, you just fold under the edges, the long edges, you fold them to the center, and give that a press. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. As I said before, Damiana has thought of everything in this pattern. Every seam has as less bulk in it as possible so that any sewing machine can handle this project. And now for my credit card pockets. So I need to give this piece a bit of an iron before I center and fuse the interfacing on top, and then just give this a press. And just looking at the time, I think there's still time. What I'm going to do now is fold and press the credit card pockets, and then we'll call it a day, because tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, we'll sew the zip pockets and the credit card pockets, and if there's time, the flap and the keyring as well. So what I do now, without going into too much detail, on the pattern piece there are two different coloured lines. You fold the blue one to the wrong side and the red one to the right side. But before I start ironing this, I like to mark, and I work from right to left. Let me just make sure this is the right side that I want to do. And then just at each fold line, I make a mark on the back of the card pocket. I prefer to do it this way, so I make a mark where the fold lines will fall in the seam of the pocket piece, and then I do the same on the other side. You can use chalk or a pencil. I just find it easier when I'm folding at the ironing board. And this is the reverse, you're viewing the reverse, but I start from right to left. And I know that the first pocket needs to be folded wrong sides together, so you're folding wrong sides together. And I use my ruler to line up the lines. In fact, I do it this way. So I position my ruler at the two marks that I've made, fold it over, and then I'll give that a press. In fact, I need to move this iron. Oh. And you can check that you've done it correctly. You give a bit of a block of steam there. Then you open that out. Then you need to flip over your pattern, flip over your card pocket panel and fold on the other side, so you're folding right sides together at the two marks. So I make sure the ruler has been positioned behind those two marks, and you can finger press before you go ahead and press with your iron. And then you flip it over again, and the third line is wrong sides together. So again, lining up those marks that you made. Damiana's pattern is extremely well detailed with plenty of photos to follow as you're going along. So there's really no danger of making a mistake at this point. And she even gives measurements, the exact measurements where the fold lines should fall if you don't have a pattern piece printed out. So you just carry on. So if you've done it right sides together for that one, you have to flip it over for the next one. I'll flip this one in the opposite direction now. We're almost done. I'll show you how it looks in a minute. There's one more fold line, so flip it over. Line up those lines with the ruler, and then remove the ruler. You could actually use a piece of cardboard from a cereal box instead for this bit, and iron on. You could iron with the cereal box under the fabric and it won't burn, but I'm not going to do that with my plastic ruler. Okay, so hopefully this will work on camera now. You can then fold up your pockets, and if I've done it right, I'll just check the measurements, which Damiana gives the measurements in the pattern, how big this piece needs to be. In fact, it needs to be the same size as your outer fabric. Ha! And it is. What I do is just check that it's the exact measurement, and then I give it a press. So there you have your 3 concertina style pockets, really clever. And I'll just show you quickly before we sign off for today. So we've got the outer piece. This is your credit card pockets, and then what we'll be doing tomorrow, we'll be stitching the credit card pockets, and we'll be making our little zipped pocket, which will go there. And that's the lining for the zip pocket, so that will be on the inside. We don't need to worry about that just yet. And we'll be making our little flap, and we'll be making a little keyring. So that is what we'll be doing tomorrow, if you care to join me. I think I did spot a question about this wild swim fabric. I think I saw someone ask where I got this one from. I'll double check, but this one is from Wool Warehouse, and I think Empress Mills does it as well. It's ever so sweet. In fact, there's another version, and I'll be making both of these for my upcoming markets. There's the duck egg blue and the dark green. And I just, the little feet poking out the water, I love that. Very popular with wild swimming ladies. So those are from woolwarehouse.co.uk or Empress Mills. They both stock, what's it called? I'm just trying to think of the name of the fabric. A Dip in the Lake. I think it's called A Dip in the Lake. Look it up. But I will put, what I'll do is I'll put a couple of comments below this video afterwards with a couple of fabric shops that have gorgeous little print fabrics where you can, which are perfect for the Kalina Mini Wallet. And I have also put, it should show up, but I'll put in afterwards in the comments, a link to the Kalina Mini Wallet pattern for you. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'll be back tomorrow, but at my sewing machine to sew the pockets up. And I think I'll be more organized for that. I think cutting and talking is not my strong point. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. And if I see any questions afterwards, I'll answer them. And hopefully see you tomorrow. Bye for now.